Alright, it's time for number 12 in my video game movie review series. With the second video game movie sequel, will this sequel go the route of Mortal Kombat Annihilation, or will this possibly be the T2 of video game movies? Resident Evil Apocalypse is the sequel to 2001's Resident Evil, and once again stars Milla Jovovich as Alice. Jovovich pretty much is the only returning actor from the original movie. There is another character, kinda, that comes over from that movie, but as far as the actors go, she's it. Well, there is the little girl who played the hologram in the first one. She actually plays a real girl in this one, and as far as I could tell, it's the same actress. But you know what I mean. Jovovich is really the only actor that came in return. This movie picks up pretty much right at the end of the original Resident Evil. There is just a little bit of overlap to explain what happened while she was knocked out in that clinic at the very end of the movie, but that scene actually does appear in this movie. If you've watched my review of the original Resident Evil, you know that I'm a big fan of that movie. And as mentioned in that review, this series has kind of become the punching bag for video game movies. The series as a whole gets a lot of hate, and to a degree I can see where some of that hate's coming from, but me myself, I enjoy the series as a whole. So how about Resident Evil Apocalypse? Is it a part of that whole that I enjoy? Well, no, not really. Like many video game movies, I saw this movie in theaters when it first came out. After the original one, I was really excited about this one. Unfortunately, it's just not nearly as good as the first one. So let's dig a little deeper and see if we can find out what it is about this one that's not as good as the first one. First of all, there's the acting. Now I know what you're saying. You're talking about acting in a Resident Evil movie. It's never really been one of its high marks. And yeah, while I enjoy the movie, I will admit that the acting in the first Resident Evil wasn't really of any kind of note. It was kind of hokey and melodramatic at times, and a lot of the performances were kind of more grandiose than they needed to be. But the fun and entertaining movies surrounding those performances made it bearable, and they didn't really stick out as much because you were just having a really good time with it. In its sequel, the performances are even more hokey and goofy, which I could live with, but unfortunately the movie surrounding all that is nowhere near as entertaining, so they stick out even more. Jovovich is pretty much the only one here doing anything resembling a good job. I really wouldn't call what she's doing here great either. It's really everybody involved. None of the performances here are very good at all. Worse yet, not only are they not good, some of them are downright grating. Mike Epps in particular. Admittedly, I'm not a big Mike Epps fan to begin with, but in this movie, I wanted to peel my face off every time he was on screen. His character is annoyingly grating from beginning to end, and many of the things he spouts out are absolutely cringeworthy. More characters from the game actually show up this time around, but they're not really treated with the care and respect that you would like them to be. Particularly Resident Evil mainstay Jill Valentine. While no, the performance here is not good at all, but the character's portrayal, just the way she's written and everything, is just bad altogether. But it's not just her, that's pretty much everybody involved in the film. So yeah, the performances here just aren't good at all, and they stick out like a sore thumb even more so because of the shit movie around them. Which brings me to the story. The story overall here, considering what it is, really isn't that bad, but it seems unnecessarily stretched out. It seems like a story that could fill about a 45-minute block, but they stretched it out to an hour and a half to 2 hours. So in other words, there's just a bunch of filler shit going on in between that's not very entertaining and pretty dull overall. That's not to say the story's great. It's not. But hey, the story from the first one wasn't great, but the execution of said story made it entertaining. Not here, they didn't get the story or the execution right. One of the things I really liked about the first movie, and I did note in my review of it, was that it didn't seem like a video game movie. Yeah, they changed a lot of stuff about Resident Evil from the game to the movie, but in doing so, the movie had its own voice, and it didn't seem like they were emulating a video game, it seemed like they were just making a movie. Not so much here. This seems very much like a video game movie. Even if you are unfamiliar with Resident Evil as a game series, I think anybody watching this will instantly say, this seems like I'm watching a video game. The first 20 minutes or so of this movie are okay, but after that, it does that thing that a lot of video game movies have done up to this point, which it seems like it's going from level to level. There's not a tremendous amount of context as to why they're doing these things. They're just doing them. Like I said a minute ago, this movie does incorporate a lot more Resident Evil stuff from the games into this movie. But that doesn't necessarily make it better for it. In fact, it made it seem worse because it seems like they're just chucking shit at the screen from the game series that you would recognize in hopes that you'd say, hey, I know this from Resident Evil 1, or that's from Resident Evil 2, or Resident Evil Nemesis. And yeah, being familiar with the game series, that does happen, but it didn't make my viewing experience any better whatsoever. It made it worse because I just kind of felt like they were pandering to me at that point. It even has a scene in the movie that is almost shot for shot one of the cinematics from Resident Evil Code Veronica. And while that scene in the game was badass, here it just seems like a cheap copy and doesn't really do much for you. One spot the movie does shine would be its special effects as compared to the first one. The movie uses a lot of practical effects, and all those effects look really good as usual. This time around they do use CG quite a bit more though. Thankfully, the CG that they use in this film does look markedly better than the original. It is still 2004 CG though, so keep that in mind. Either way though, the effects in this movie do look pretty good, most notably the Nemesis character. While yes, he is pretty much pulled directly from the game, and the character does seem a bit out of place at times, it doesn't change the fact that the effect and makeup and everything that goes along with said character looks great. Guys, I really wanted to like this movie. And while I knew that when I first saw it, I didn't like this movie, I was hoping that maybe that gap in time would make things a little better. But it really didn't. This just isn't a good movie. I could sit here and shit on this movie all day, but honestly, after rewatching it, I'm not even interested enough in this movie to do that. It was just pretty dull, boring, and unexciting, which I guess is what happens when you take a story that could fill about 45 minutes and stretch it out to 2 hours. At the end of the day, Resident Evil Apocalypse is one of the reasons that the Resident Evil series has such a bad name. And while one of the complaints about the first one was that it veered too much from the video game series, I think Resident Evil Apocalypse shows what happens when you try and stick to that source material a little bit too much. If they had done like the first one and just tried to tell their own story, instead of trying to pander to the fans of the game series, this movie may have turned out to be better. But that's not what they did. Instead, they gave us this hunk of shit. And regardless of what you think of the series as a whole, when it comes to Resident Evil Apocalypse, if you just absolutely gotta watch it, check it out on USA Up All Night. This was just pretty boring and dull, guys. I mean, it was almost to check it out on Netflix, but I just couldn't bring myself to do that. I gotta be honest. This one's really not worth much of your time at all. So there it is, guys, my review of Resident Evil Apocalypse. If you enjoyed and want more content like this, hit that subscribe button and help my little channel grow. If you liked what I had to say, give me a thumbs up. If not, let me know in the comments below why. And as always, I'll see you guys next time.
You motherfuckers is crazy. Look at that big motherfucker got a rocket launcher.
And this movie's just really disappointing. It just really kind of sucks. And a lot of the dialogue in it is just, oh my god, it's like cringeworthy. Especially when it's coming from this guy.
GTA motherfucker! Oh, yeah! 10 points!
Ugh. So what's next on the video game movie front? Ooh, one I actually haven't seen yet.